Welcome to another Jabba's Palace roll call. Today's character, Jakeel, otherwise known as Toothface. Jakeel is very much a background alien in Jabba's palace, but as I'm going to show you today, he's in a surprising number of scenes. We see him for the first time here under this archway as the droids are entering Jabba's palace, and in fact he stays pretty much right here during this entire first sequence in the palace. You can see him there in the background when Luke's hologram is being played.
Greetings, Exalted One.
And we also see him briefly in this sequence when Ula is thrown into the Rancor pit. You can see him right here in the background, kind of cheering half-heartedly. We can also see him during the sequence when Leia brings Chewbacca to the palace. He's just there in his usual archway, kind of just watching from the background. He can also be seen in this large group of aliens that's revealed after Han is woken up from his sleep. You can also see Jakeel just after the Rancor is killed when Lando kind of rushes off. There he is in the background. This is probably the closest he gets to one of the main cast members. He can also be found in this scene when they're sentencing our heroes to death in the Sarlacc pit. There he is in the background in one of his favorite places, an archway. He's also in this big group of aliens filing out of the throne room on their way to the sail barge. And speaking of the sail barge, I had to double check this, but he is indeed on the sail barge as well. In fact, you just saw him, but let me show you that again. This is him behind Jabba on the throne, although you can't really tell for sure. Just see his furry body for most of this until he turns slightly and you can see his tusks there. Finally, as Leia makes her move against Jabba, you can see Jakeel just in the background, again with Yak Face, but just really for a split second. I've got it slowed down here. And I think that's it in terms of his appearances in the film, although you'll probably agree that he actually appears in almost the entire Jabba's Palace sequence. It's actually kind of impressive compared to some of the background characters that are just there for one or two shots. Like so many characters in Jabba's Palace, Toothface started out as a concept maquette, which is a sculpture made by one of the artists there in the creature shop. In this case, it was Chris Wayless. He has made quite a few characters that ended up being chosen as aliens in Jabba's Palace. It might be easiest just to hear what he had to say about it in an interview with Tom Spina of Regal Robot.
Toothface is very specifically taken from one species, and that is, I think it's a South Asian bush pig or something like that. It's very much what I did in that design. I basically took a long boar head and crushed the front and back ends and removed the nose and the ears. So that was an easy one. It was very straightforward, and it was an animal that I was very familiar with. I find a lot of inspiration in all the various pig forms.
As you can see from this comparison, which shows the concept maquette on the left and the actual costume that they used in the film on the right, they did change the design a little bit in between these steps. And the main difference really is that he doesn't have a large tuft of hair on the top of his head. If we go and look at some of the concept artwork that was made based on the concept maquette, like this one, you can see that it appears like they may have scribbled out the hair on the top, or perhaps tried to erase it and then scribbled out. I don't know. I think this one looks like they were trying to change it, and on this one it actually explicitly says, Phil, referring to Phil Tippett, can we shave this guy's head like this? It gives it more character. And so they made a conscious decision to get rid of that hair on the top of his head and go with the look we saw in the film. The full-size costume was sculpted by Judy Elkins, who is actually the person who sculpted and created Yak Face, you may recall. Here you can see in this photo she's working on the full-size sculpt, referring to the concept maquette there on top of his head, which is kind of cute. British mime artist Tim Dry was the one inside the suit in Jabba's palace, by the way. Now that we know how the character was brought to life on screen, I think it's interesting to look at some of the other aspects of the character, such as his backstory. Written in 1995, the book Tales from Jabba's Palace is, of course, a treasure trove of info about most of the characters in the palace. And that's certainly true for Toothface, or Jakeel as he's called in the book. By the way, I pronounce his name Jaquil instead of Jaquil or something else like that, since that is the way Shaquille O'Neal's name is actually spelled, and I think he, at the time in 1995, would have been extremely famous and probably had an influence on the name that they chose for him. At least that's just my theory. Jaquil actually appears throughout the book, making little cameos in various stories, but his own is called Let Us Pray, the Whiffid's Tale. In it, we learn that although Jaquil is at Jabba's palace, he's actually working for the Lady Valerian, who's another Whippid who's Jabba's main rival on Tatooine. She and Jaquil were working together to assassinate Jabba with some slow-acting poison, but everything wasn't quite going according to plan. I won't ruin it for you, but it's actually a pretty interesting story.
In 1998, Decipher had a Jabba's Palace expansion pack for their collectible card game that included a lot of sort of obscure characters and things like that, including Jaquil. They seem to have built this, on top of the information that was already in the Tales from Jabba's Palace book. This just says, Whiffid, spy in league with the Lady Valerian, yearns for battle, enjoys hearing the screams of his victims, plotting to kill Jabba. It's very compact, but there's a lot of information in that little description there. In addition, they also have just a generic Whiffid card that uses basically a photoshopped version of the original concept maquette there, and you can see it's got the hair on top of the head and everything. This one just says, Whiffids originate from Tula in the Kael'ta system, a planet extremely distant from its sun, accustomed to hunting for prey in the near dark and the bitter cold.
Now let's take a look at some of the other merchandise made for this character.
Now, in these videos I make about Jabba's Palace characters, particularly the background characters, I will often reference this model kit from MPC. It was made in 1983 and just is a plastic model kit of Jabba's Palace and includes a lot of obscure aliens. Some of them are ones that only basically appear in physical form in this kit. Jabba the Hutt throne room action scene, very key item for many of these videos. But when you open up the instructions here, which has a list of all of the characters, he is nowhere to be found. Toothface is not in here. Even though they have characters like Hoover and Yuzum and so forth, the Mole, which we haven't made a video about yet, but we will at some point. Some pretty, obscure characters are in here, but they do not have Toothface, unfortunately, so we're going to have to look elsewhere for the first appearance of the character.
Toothface did appear in some media back in the vintage days, including this famous shot of aliens from Jabba's palace, and there's another shot here that actually did get used in a product, a Craftmaster puzzle. Here you can see it put together. I really like the poses that they have them in here. But that's not all.
I'm a big fan of these activity books and coloring books that came out in the vintage era. These are all from 1983. These two were made by Happy House. They also put out various other ones as well. Activities, things for kids to do, little word puzzles and so forth. And then this one is from Kenner. It's actually the official Return of the Jedi coloring book. Got some really good artwork in here that would be fun to color, I'm sure. But it also has some rather obscure characters, including none other than Yakface and Toothface together in their little archway in Jabba's palace, which I think is really cool. Very nice artwork there, indeed. And if we look at, we'll look at this one first. The activity books, you can see they have a bunch of different little word activities or, various types of things, little crossword type things. And on this page here, which is not one of their more inspired puzzles, I will have to say, you're supposed to find the word monster hidden 9 places in this puzzle. It's just, it's kind of a weird word search. But we also have, of course, Toothface right there. I don't know, I suppose this artwork was made just for this product, which is kind of interesting as well. I think this is not coming from anything else, like from Kenner or anything like that. They probably drew this based on the publicity photos that they were given. And In this one here, which is I think is my favorite one, the Monster Activity book, we have something pretty special. I think I've talked about Bib Fortuna's hand in the past, but they have, if I can find it, a very special item right here. This is a toothpaste puppet. It says Toothface Puppet Fun. You're supposed to take this here, cut it out, glue it onto a paper bag, the kind you might take your lunch in, and then take this other section here, which is his sort of lower jaw, and put it on the other part of the paper bag, and you can make yourself a puppet. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that I made this with my son when he was quite young at some point. You know, at that point it was, you know, it was still the 2000s, let's say, the sort of mid-2000s, but, you know, it's been a while. I don't know what actually happened to that one that we made, or I would show it to you. Well, actually, just a minute. All right, so I have taken the original here and scanned it with my computer and then printed it out. I cleaned it up a little bit so it's not all yellow like this paper was. Just made it kind of, you know, black and white line art. And we can go ahead and use this to make our own puppet. If we follow the instructions, it says to cut out the you know, different pages. Ask a grown-up to help you with the scissors. Very important. Keep that in mind. And then color the head and jaw. Oh, color it. I suppose it would look better colored. Just a minute. All right, well, I'm back. I went ahead and did a little Photoshop color job on this artwork, and then printed it out. My printer seems to be having a little problem. It's got a little banding there, but we'll just ignore that. And we're going to use this to make our own puppet. We can cut this out. I actually went out and bought some brown paper bags. I haven't had these in the house for quite some time. Not as popular as they used to be, I guess. But I did find these at the dollar store. And we're going to go ahead and cut this out and make our own puppet, shall we? Okay, it took a little longer than expected. I didn't try too terribly hard to make it really precise with all of the cuts. There's a lot of, you know, tendrils of hair here that are difficult to cut around, but I think you get the point. You're supposed to put him, you know, more or less like that, and then when we glue it to the paper bag, you can see that it opens up kind of like that. This part will be in here, and it'll allow you to make it into a makeshift puppet. So let's actually try and glue it on, shall we? We'll wait for that to dry for a few minutes. So here is the finished puppet. Actually looks pretty cool, I think. Of course, you just put your hand here in the bag, and then it's a little hard to get the right angle here with the camera, but you can just make his mouth move that way. Well, hello there. My name is Toothface. How do you do? I'm not really sure why I used that voice, but, you know, it seems weirdly appropriate. I'm not actually sure what Jaquil or Toothface's, you know, voice would sound like. Maybe he sounds more like a pig or something like that. Who knows? But anyway, this is a fun little project that you could do. I actually have made a PDF of the black and white and the color versions of this, so you can download, print it, you can color it yourself, or you can use my colored version if you want, and make your own puppet if you want. If you do that, go ahead and tag me on social media if you can. I'd really like to see what people have made. Anyway, this is kind of fun. Moving right along. And our final book for the day is going to be this Star Wars Book of Masks that I made a whole video about. It's kind of a whole thing. I'd advise you to watch that video if you haven't, because it was kind of hard tracking one of these down. This is obviously a Japanese copy that has some additional masks that were not in the American version of this book, and one of those masks, believe it or not, in addition to Jabba, is in fact our favorite guy, Toothface. Here he is. And, you know, it's totally, you know, unique artwork that, as far as I know, does not appear anywhere else. So I think that's pretty cool. On the back, all of these have a little blurb about the character. So you can see he's got this picture here. It says Toothface, Toothface. And then basically the blurb here just says that he's a guy in the palace who is a strong soldier who protects Jabba. I feel like they just made it up, but he's covered from head to toe in brown fur and has large tusks and large claws. So that's all they actually say about him. But I mean, they're not wrong, I guess. So anyway, that's a pretty cool, lesser known version of Toothface. Now, moving right along to sort of more three-dimensional representations of the character. If you are sort of a role-playing game fan or a tabletop game, fan who likes miniatures and things like that, you may recognize this set. This was from West End Games in 1989. They released a number of Star Wars-themed lead miniatures. And if we look on the back, it actually doesn't say anything about Toothface. But this guy here, the one that they're calling Effant Mon, looks a little bit suspicious. And in fact, if we take the miniature, this is a sealed version, but I have another one. If we take that miniature and look at him more closely, let's see if we can get it in focus. These are actually quite small. You can see that in reality, this is actually Toothface. And they got confused. I guess the long face may have, made them think that it was Effant Mon or something, but clearly, this is Toothface with his tusks and everything, and his furry body. So I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that this is the first three-dimensional version of the character. Now, this is the first and only officially released figure for Toothface, or Jaquil, released by Hasbro in 2004. It's actually called Jaquil, and then, as a sort of a subcategory, it says Jabba's Sail Barge. So this is actually supposed to be the Jabba's Sail Barge version, although I don't really know why, because as we saw earlier in the video, you can barely tell that Jaquil is on the sail barge. Maybe they just wanted to fill out their ranks of guys that they had on the sail barge. I'm not really sure. This originally came with a large rifle, which I'm not sure where it is, but I don't use it for a display anyway because it looks a little strange to have him with a giant rifle there in the palace, if you ask me. This is not the nicest looking figure in the world, let's be honest. It's got some weird articulation, just sort of cut joints like this on all of it. He doesn't have any joints at all down here on his knees. And, I mean, it's got a face only a Whiffid could love, as they say. I would say, it's hard to do too much more than this, I suppose, in some ways, but yeah, you could definitely do a better version of Toothface in this scale, I think. In fact, speaking of which, there was a version created just a few years ago by the Next 17, who is basically a guy who is creating his own versions of Kenner-inspired, Kenner-reminiscent, vintage-style figures. And he did a lot of Jabba's Palace ones. I've talked about him on the channel before a number of times, but this is his version of Toothface. He calls him Tuskface, I think. But I really like this one. I think it's one of his better figures. And it definitely does seem to be reminiscent of the Kenner style, in my opinion. Comes with a little dagger there. And they also released a Sith version of him with a double lightsaber, which I think is pretty cool as well. So definitely a lot of Toothface love there over at the Next 17. I believe these are both still available for purchase if you want to get them. I'll put a link in the video description to their website. In addition, Trash Compactor Customs also has a 3D printed version that you can buy that looks pretty good as well. You can get that from him on Etsy. I'll put a link in the video description. So aside from those books that I showed you earlier, this is, as far as I know, all of the Toothface / Jekyll related merchandise that has been released in the last, say, 4 decades, which is not a lot, although in some ways it's surprising that it's this much. Do let me know if you can think of anything else that I've overlooked, though. However, I'm very happy to announce today that Regal Robot is going to be releasing a very special Toothface-related item. It is, as you can probably guess, a replica of the original concept maquette that Chris Walas made all the way back in the beginning when he was, proposing this character. So, as with all of these items in the archive collection, they went to the actual Lucasfilm archives, scanned the original maquette, and then set to work replicating it as close as they possibly can. I think they did a really good job, so let's go ahead and take a look at it right now. So here we have Regal Robot's replica of the original concept maquette. As you can see, it's got this central part here that would have been made out of clay on the original, and then the rest of it is all completely covered with faux fur. And, sometimes I'm not the biggest fan of faux fur or fake hair on things like toys or statues and things like this, but I think this actually looks really good. I was a little relieved, I guess you'd say, when I opened it originally and saw how it looked. I think it looks really good, actually, and they've chosen a kind of hair or fur that doesn't look too artificial. It's got different colors, some gray in here as well as brown. I assume this matches the one that was actually used on the maquette in the archives pretty well. I know Tom Spina is kind of a stickler for fake fur, choosing the exact right kinds of fur to replicate the original look. So I'm pretty happy with how this does look. Of course, compared to what we saw on screen, as I've discussed already, this is a bit of a different look for the character because he doesn't have all of this hair or fur in the version we saw on screen. And I think, probably it was the right decision to do that. But, it is kind of interesting to see this version of him. So this is going to be available in 2 different versions. They both come with the maquette itself, but depending on which version you choose, you get something extra. The signature edition, which is what I have here, comes with a signature plaque like this, with Chris Walas' signature on it. This is going to be limited to 150 pieces and will cost $399. There is also going to be a Legacy Edition. The Legacy Edition, as you may recall, comes with not only a signature plaque, but also a piece of original artwork done by the person who created the character or the maquette in question. In this case, Chris Walas made 50 different sketches of Toothface to include with those pieces. So as you can imagine, it's limited to 50 pieces, selling at $699. I think he did a fantastic job with those sketches, but I decided to go with just the signature edition in this case because I'm running out of space personally in my display case, and I decided, well, maybe I'll reserve a little space for perhaps some more major characters that get released in the future. But at only 50 pieces, I'm 100% sure that Legacy Edition Toothface is going to sell out very quickly. So do keep that in mind if you're interested in that. Now, these are going to be going up in a few days. They're not available quite yet. Sometimes when I make these videos, the things are available right on that day to pre-order. But in this case, you're going to wait until April 7th, which is Tuesday. It's going to be going up at noon Eastern Time, and you can pre-order them at that point. But you can still, go to the Regal Robot website, which I have a link in the video description, or you can go to their, social media channels and so forth if you wanted to get a little more information. But that's about it for today's video. I hope you learned a little bit about Toothface. I know I did. Some of it was just kind of reminding me of things that I already knew, but I think he's an interesting character. Another one of those background characters that I think You know, especially if Kenner had decided to make a figure of him instead of, say, Yakface or somebody else, might be one of those figures or characters that we all remember fondly. As it is, he's a little bit more of a footnote, but still very, very cool character from Jabba's palace, who is in a surprising number of scenes, as you may have seen. All right, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.
Like so many characters from Jabba's palace, the character of Toothpaste
Says Jaquil Toothfaith.